One, when the new government took over, only 3% of the 4,700 newspapers were controlled by the government or the party associated by the government. അതായത് 4,700 പത്രങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നപ്പോൾ ഒരു പുതിയ സർക്കാർ വന്നപ്പോൾ only 3% I think will be around 141, less than 150 were controlled or were beholden to the government of the day or the party that is in power. In the first weeks of the new government, the regime deployed radio and press to stoke fears of a pending uprising. അതെന്തോ ഒരു ഭയങ്കര സംഭവം, നമ്മളെല്ലാം അപകടത്തിലാണ് എന്നുള്ളൊരു സംഭവം. അത് റേഡിയോ പ്രസ് എന്ന ഇതിൽ വഴി ആ ഒരു that narrative started being floated. They just started feeding the narrative. One publishing house established a huge empire that drove out competition and purchased media outlet. ഒരു publishing house, ഒരു company, a company that became a publishing house, that became so huge that it started buying up, swallowing other media outlets. Some independent newspapers and non-political weeklies accommodated the regime through self-censorship or dealt with approved topics. അപ്പോൾ പലരും പല മാധ്യമങ്ങളും ഞങ്ങൾ അരാഷ്ട്രീയമാണ്, ന്യൂട്രലാണ്, വി ഡോണ്ട് ഹാവ് പൊളിറ്റിക്സ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് അവർ അപ്രൂവ്ഡ് ടോപ്പിക്സിൽ മാത്രം കോൺസെൻട്രേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങി. Number 5, journalists were replaced with ill-trained amateurs in leadership positions, and some veteran journalists collaborated with the regime in order to maintain or enhance their careers. അതെല്ലായിടത്തും സംഭവിക്കുന്നത്, ജേർണലിസ്റ്റിൽ മാത്രമുള്ള ഒരു പ്രശ്നമല്ല. Then journalists from a particular religion and their spouses were sidelined or replaced. Reports in news and opinion pages were controlled through directives transmitted daily through the party apparatus. This I'm sure you will be able to relate. I have to say that not too long ago, a very senior person in this country, he used to call one of the most powerful newspapers in this country and tell him what should be the page one news items. And he used to be called as a bureau chief. So again, I'm reading that point. It's a very important. Reports in news and opinion pages were controlled through directives transmitted daily through the party apparatus. Detailed guidelines stated which reports could or could not be reported and how to report the news. Number 8, editors who failed to follow these instructions could be fired, or if believed to be acting with intent to harm the country, imprisoned. ഒന്നിൽ ജോലിയിൽ നിന്ന് പുറത്താക്കപ്പെടുക, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആന്റി നാഷണൽ എന്ന് മറ്റു കാര്യങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞ് they could be imprisoned. News is not fully, this is also a very, very important thing. Number 9, news is not fully suppressed. അതായത് കാര്യം അവർ ചോദിക്കും, we are not suppressing news, you are free to report whatever you want. News is not suppressed, but its flow and interpretation are tightly controlled so that access is denied to alternative sources of news. Shortages, material shortages, foreign exchange shortages ensured that the pages of newspapers were drastically reduced. Now, number 10, the last point. In a little over 10 years, within 10 വർഷത്തിന് ശേഷം, out of the original, ഞാൻ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ 4,700 newspapers, only 1,100 remained. While the circulation of these was around 40.4 lakh, the circulation of the 325 newspapers associated with the ruling party was an astounding 2.1 crore. അതായത് 4,700 പത്രങ്ങളുള്ളതിൽ 1,100 മാത്രമേ റിമൈനിങ് ഉള്ളൂ. ഔട്ട് ഓഫ് വിച്ച് 325, ഈ 1,100 സർക്കുലേഷൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ദാറ്റ് വാസ് അറൌണ്ട് 4.4 lakh. പക്ഷേ the circulation of the 325 newspaper that were closely associated with the regime or the government was an astounding 2.1 crore. One pro-government editor became the most successful by publishing stories of ritual murder to malign one community, alleged sex crimes and financial scams. ഒരു journalist, he became so prominent by focus on this model, by publishing stories of ritual murder to malign one community, alleged sex crimes and financial scam. Then a former journalist then wrote in his diary, any person who still has a residue of honor will be very careful not to become a journalist. ഞാൻ ഒന്നും കൂടെ വായിക്കാം. A former journalist then wrote in his diary, any person who still has a residue of honor will be very careful not to become a journalist. അതായത് അഭിമാനത്തിൻ്റെയോ ഓണസ്റ്റിയുടെ ഒരു കണിക പോലും ഉള്ള ഒരു മനുഷ്യൻ ഒരിക്കലും ഒരു വ്യക്തി ഒരിക്കലും ഒരു ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് ആവാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കില്ല എന്ന് ഒരാൾ അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഡയറിയിൽ എഴുതി. This is not a game. I apologize to you for using such a term at the beginning of my conversation with you. This is not about contemporary India either. If any of you made the mistake thinking that I was talking about India, you are wrong. All the 10 points I listed above, crushing dissent, manipulating the narrative, stoking fears of raging conspiracies, intimidating journalists, and buying up and taming questioning media outlets. All are instances that took place between 1933 and 1944, that is 90 to 80 years ago in Germany. I do not have to tell you which regime ran Germany in that decade. So I don't know how many of you have made any association at all with the current, what is happening in India, but what I read about that, all the 10 points, it was documented points, this happened in Germany between 1933 and 1944.